In June of 2024, a tech outlet called NeoWin noticed something strange happening on freshly installed copies of Windows 11, and within days, the story had spread across PC World, ZDNet, The Register, and a dozen other outlets covering the exact same complaint. People were setting up brand new computers, signing in with their Microsoft account the way Windows told them to, and reaching their desktop only to find it already cluttered with old files, folders, and shortcuts they never asked to see again. There was no prompt, there was no checkbox, there was no moment where Windows paused and said, "Hey, do you want us to sync your desktop, documents, and pictures to the cloud?" It just happened, silently, in the background, the instant the account connected. Microsoft had quietly changed how new Windows 11 installations behaved, and the automatic folder backup feature inside OneDrive was now switching itself on without a single click of consent. For years, the same feature had required you to explicitly turn it on, and Microsoft would only nudge you with the occasional reminder if you hadn't. That changed. Now it was on by default, the moment you signed in, and the only way most people found out was by staring at a desktop full of files they thought they'd cleaned up months ago, forms filled with confused, angry users. One person described losing photos after a reinstall because the sync grabbed their folders before they realized what was happening. Another said they had to decline the same backup offer twice, only to watch OneDrive quietly turn it back on anyway during a later update. On Microsoft's own support forums, people accused the company of taking possession of their files without permission and scanning private documents they never intended to hand over to anyone. This wasn't a hypothetical privacy debate happening in a courtroom. This was regular people opening their laptops and discovering that folders they assumed were sitting safely on their own hard drive had actually been quietly rerouted into somebody else's server somewhere else without them ever agreeing to it. Here's the part that should genuinely worry you. This isn't some obscure setting buried 3 menus deep that only power users stumble onto. This is the default experience for millions of ordinary Windows 11 users the moment they set up a new PC while connected to the internet and signed into a Microsoft account, which is exactly how Microsoft wants you to install it in the first place. If you've bought a new laptop recently, reinstalled Windows after a crash, or handed a computer to a family member who just clicked through the blue screens without reading anything, there's a very real chance your personal files, the ones you assume live only on your machine, are quietly being uploaded to Microsoft's servers right now. And if you don't know where to look, you'd never even know it was happening until your storage fills up, until a sync conflict deletes something you needed, or until you try to move to a new computer and realize half your files are trapped inside a cloud account you never meant to depend on. So today, I'm going to walk you through exactly what this feature does, why Microsoft insists it's actually helpful, where the real risk hides, and most importantly, how to check what OneDrive is doing on your machine right now and turn it off safely, without losing a single file in the process. Because the danger here was never that OneDrive backs things up. The danger is doing it quietly enough that you don't realize it's happening until it's too late to undo cleanly. Let's start with what this feature actually is, because Microsoft doesn't call it hijacking your desktop, they call it OneDrive folder backup, and it's been sitting inside Windows for years in one form or another. It targets a handful of the personal folders every Windows user has, desktop, documents, and pictures, with music and videos sometimes swept in as well depending on your version. When it's switched on, Windows doesn't just copy those folders somewhere else, it actually relocates them. The real physical location of your documents folder stops being the traditional path you'd expect, and instead becomes a folder living inside your OneDrive directory, synchronized in real time with Microsoft's cloud. Windows disguises this by still showing you a folder labeled Documents and File Explorer, so on the surface, nothing looks different. But under the hood, the actual location has moved, and every file you save there is now quietly climbing up to a server the moment your internet connection allows it. That's the trick. Nothing about the everyday experience changes enough to alert you. You keep saving files into the same folder with the same name, and Windows keeps that illusion perfectly intact, while the underlying plumbing has been swapped out entirely. Now, to be fair, this isn't some sinister plot with no upside. There are genuine reasons Microsoft built this feature and genuine reasons some users like it. If your hard drive fails catastrophically tomorrow, having your desktop and documents already synced to OneDrive means you can sit down at a replacement computer, sign into the same Microsoft account, and watch those files reappear without having to dig through a physical backup drive. If you regularly switch between a laptop and a desktop, folder backup means the file you edited this morning on one machine is already waiting for you on the other by the time you sit down. OneDrive also layers in version history, so if a file gets corrupted or badly edited, you may be able to roll it back to an earlier version, and it maintains its own recycle bin separate from your local one, which has saved plenty of people from an accidental deletion. None of that is fake or exaggerated. Used deliberately by someone who understands what it's doing, This feature is genuinely useful. The entire problem is the word deliberately. A feature that quietly turns itself on without asking isn't protecting you, it's making a decision on your behalf and hoping you never notice enough to object. And that's where the real danger creeps in, because sync is not the same thing as a proper independent backup, no matter how much Microsoft's marketing language blurs that distinction. A real backup exists as a separate, isolated copy that doesn't automatically inherit every mistake you make on the original. Synchronization does the opposite. It mirrors changes almost instantly, for better and for worse. If you accidentally delete an important file from your Documents folder, that deletion doesn't stay contained to your computer. It can propagate straight up to OneDrive and then back down to any other device signed into that same account. The mistake follows you everywhere the sync reaches. Now stretch that same logic towards something far scarier: ransomware. If malicious software starts encrypting files on a machine where OneDrive folder backup is actively running, there's a real risk those newly encrypted scrambled files get treated as legitimate changes and synced straight up into the cloud, right alongside your good copies. OneDrive's version history may help you claw some of it back afterward, but you don't want your entire recovery plan hinging on one company's cloud infrastructure and one synchronization system correctly untangling a mess it wasn't designed to prevent in the first place. A single point of failure is a single point of failure, no matter how many reassuring blue cloud icons sit next to it. There's a second layer to this that deserves just as much attention, and it's the one that got people the angriest on Microsoft's own forums. Once your files are sitting inside OneDrive's cloud storage, Microsoft doesn't treat that storage as a completely untouched private black box. The company runs automated scanning across content stored there, in part to catch illegal material being distributed through its services, which sounds reasonable on paper until you remember these are supposed to be your personal documents, photos, and desktop files, not public uploads you knowingly submitted for review. Those automated systems aren't flawless either. Mistaken detections have led to accounts being temporarily locked or flagged in the past, over completely innocent files caught in an imperfect filter. So you end up with a scenario where files you never intended to hand over to anyone are not only sitting on someone else's server, they're also being run through automated content checks you never agreed to. And an error in that process could genuinely lock you out of your own account. That's not a wild conspiracy theory. That's simply what happens when personal storage lives inside a company's broader cloud ecosystem instead of staying entirely local. So let's actually fix this, starting with figuring out whether it's happening on your machine at all, because plenty of people reading this right now have no idea either way. Look down near the clock in your taskbar. In the notification area on the bottom right of your screen, you may need to click the small upward arrow to reveal hidden icons, and somewhere in there should be the OneDrive cloud symbol. Click it, open the settings gear icon, and look for a section called Sync and Backup, then select Manage Backup. This screen is the single most important stop in this entire process, because it tells you exactly which folders OneDrive currently controls. Pay close attention to desktop, documents, and pictures specifically, since those are the three most commonly swept up. You can cross-check this by also opening the Windows Backup application from the Start menu and expanding the Folders section, which should tell you the same story from a slightly different angle. Do not touch anything yet. This step is purely reconnaissance. You're confirming what's actually happening before you make a single change, because acting first and checking later is exactly how people end up losing files they needed. Once you know which folders are involved, go verify where they physically live, because Windows will happily keep showing you a friendly folder name even after the underlying location has shifted entirely. Open File Explorer, navigate to your Documents folder, and check the address bar or the folder's properties for its real path. A normal, untouched Documents folder typically sits somewhere like C, Users, your name, Documents. A version that's been folded into OneDrive folder backup instead lives under something like C, Users, your name, OneDrive, Documents. That single difference in the path tells you everything. Check Desktop and Pictures the exact same way because each folder can be handled independently, and it's entirely possible one is synced while another isn't. Don't assume the label on the folder tells you the truth. The label is designed to make the transition invisible. The path is where the truth actually lives, and checking it takes less than a minute. Before you disable anything, and I mean before you touch a single toggle, you need to confirm your files are genuinely, physically present on the computer itself, not just visible through a cloud-connected folder that's technically empty on your hard drive. Open your OneDrive folder and look closely at the small status icon sitting next to each file. A blue cloud icon means that file exists online only and hasn't actually been downloaded onto this machine, no matter how normal it looks sitting there in File Explorer. A green check mark means a local copy currently exists on the device. A solid green circle with a white check inside it means the file has been explicitly marked to always stay on this device regardless of what happens elsewhere. Before you disable folder backup on anything you care about, every important file in that folder needs to show that solid, always available status, not just the online-only cloud icon. If you spot files sitting in that blue cloud-only state, right-click the folder, select the option to always keep it on this device, and then wait, patiently, while OneDrive actually finishes downloading everything. For anything you genuinely cannot afford to lose, copy it, not move it, onto a separate external drive as an extra layer of insurance before you change a single OneDrive setting. That single word, copy instead of move, is the difference between a safety net and a mistake you can't undo. Only once you've done all of that should you actually go turn the feature off. And even then, do it one folder at a time rather than flipping every switch simultaneously. Head back into OneDrive's settings, into sync and backup, then manage backup and select the specific folder you no longer want under OneDrive's control. Choose the option to stop backing it up and read every single word of the message OneDrive shows you next, because this is the moment people get careless and it costs them. OneDrive will typically ask whether you want to keep those files only inside OneDrive or move them back so they exist only on this PC. Read that choice slowly. If you select keeping them locally, OneDrive will attempt to move the files back into your traditional local folder structure, but if any of them are still sitting in that online-only state you checked earlier, it may simply tell you to download them first before it can complete the move. If, after disabling the backup, you notice files still sitting inside the OneDrive folder rather than your expected local folder, you may need to manually drag them from a path, like C, users, your name, OneDrive, documents, back into C, users, your name, documents yourself. Apply the same careful comparison to desktop and pictures. Open both locations side by side. Confirm every file you expect to see is actually there. Open a few at random to make sure they aren't corrupted. And only after all of that should you even consider deleting anything left behind in the OneDrive copy. Do not start by deleting the OneDrive folder outright. Do not start messing with folder permissions to force the issue. And do not go digging through the registry because some forum comment insisted that worked for them once. Use OneDrive's own supported controls first, verify the outcome carefully, and only clean up the leftovers once you've confirmed nothing important was left behind. There's one more layer to this worth handling while you're already in the settings, because Microsoft doesn't stop at just re-enabling the backup once. Windows will keep gently encouraging you toward additional Microsoft services through recurring setup prompts, suggestions to finish configuring your device, or tips about getting the most out of Windows. To cut down on these, open Settings, go to System, then Notifications, and expand the Additional Settings section. Depending on which version of Windows you're running, you might see toggles for the welcome experience, suggestions about using Windows more effectively, or recommendations to complete device setup. Turn off whichever ones you don't want nagging you again. It's also worth visiting Settings, Accounts, and Windows Backup directly, where you can review exactly which applications, saved preferences, stored credentials, and folders Windows is currently syncing through your Microsoft account. The exact labels shift slightly between Windows versions, but the underlying goal stays the same in every case. Know precisely what's enabled on your machine instead of discovering it accidentally 3 months from now, when your desktop mysteriously fills up with old files again after a routine update, quietly flips the switch back on. None of this is meant to convince you that OneDrive itself is some malicious tool you should avoid entirely. Used on purpose, with full understanding of what it's doing, it genuinely protects people from losing everything when a hard drive dies unexpectedly, and it genuinely makes switching between multiple devices smoother than it would otherwise be. The problem was never the existence of the feature. The problem is a company quietly deciding for you, without so much as a single confirmation prompt, that your personal desktop and documents belong inside their cloud storage system by default. That decision should always sit with you, not with whatever Microsoft assumes you'd probably want if you never bothered to check. So treat OneDrive as one useful layer inside a broader plan, not as your entire safety net standing alone. Keep a separate, independent backup of anything genuinely important, stored somewhere completely outside of OneDrive, ideally on a different physical drive or device entirely, so a single account lockout, a single sync error, or a single ransomware infection can never wipe out every copy of something you can't replace. Cloud storage is a convenience layered on top of good habits. It was never designed to replace them. If you take one thing away from all of this, let it be this simple two-step habit. Open OneDrive today, right now, before you close this video, and check exactly which folders it's currently managing on your machine. Then, verify the real physical folder paths for desktop, documents, and pictures, and confirm your important files are genuinely available locally, not just floating somewhere online behind a friendly folder icon. If you already knew this feature was active and you deliberately chose to keep it running, there's nothing else you need to do here. You were already ahead of the story everyone else got caught by in the summer of 2024. But if you assumed this was switched off, The same way most of the people who found their desktops cluttered with old files assumed exactly that, now you know precisely where to look and precisely how to fix it without losing a single thing along the way. Subscribe for more plain English Windows advice from someone who has spent decades untangling the exact kind of mess that quiet, unannounced defaults like this one leave behind. And until next time, my friends, stay grumpy.